past few days. But the NBA draft lottery is Tuesday night. And with that in mind, I wanted to connect with Strongjaw and start by asking him a simple question. Here's the question. As it pertains to which player is going to get picked number one overall in the 2022 NBA draft, does it matter which franchise wins the lottery on Tuesday night? Because sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. Like in 2003, I don't think it would have mattered who was picking first. They were taking LeBron James. 2012, it would not have mattered who was picking first. They're taking Anthony Davis. 2015, I don't think it matters who's picking first. Probably taking Karl Anthony Towns. 2019, benefit of hindsight, perhaps it should have mattered, but I don't think it mattered who won the lottery. They were taking Zion Williamson. So right now, there seems to be at least 3, maybe 4 players who you can find at the top of somebody's big board or mock drafts. Tell me, Strongjaw, does it matter which team wins the lottery as it pertains to which player is going to be picked first?
Yeah. Good morning, GP, and happy Monday. I do believe it matters this year more so than most. We have, really for several months now in this draft, there has been a clear top 4 in this draft, but to this point, there has been no clear number 1. We've got Chet Holmgren, Jabari Smith, Paolo Banchero, and Jaden Ivey, who I think in some order, and maybe in that order, will end up going number 1 in this draft. But, I like Jaden Ivey. I think will end up going number 4 out of those 4. I have him number 1 on the big board. And I've heard that there are teams, or at least one team, who has Jaden Ivey at number 1 on their big board. So I think it's going to matter who gets the number 1 pick, if only because team fit, more so than I think in recent years, is going to dictate who ends up going number 1 in this draft. I have a mock draft coming out on Monday, kind of a prelude to the draft lottery on Tuesday. And I wrote a little bit about this, and I know you mentioned it in your last mock draft as well. But to me, it does feel like over the next month, we may draw closer to a more definitive look at how this draft goes. And I do think that over the next 30 days or so, Chet Holmgren may end up emerging as, okay, we've been thinking about this class as a clear top 4, but no clear number 1. Chet Holmgren, to me, I think of the 4, has the most likely chance to emerge as the guy who is not maybe consensus, but pretty darn close to consensus number 1 pick. He's 7 foot tall. He's 195 pounds. He's an elite defensive prospect. And we saw even at Gonzaga last season, the flashes that he showed on offense, I think, are going to translate. So if you are 7 foot tall and you have guard skills in the way that Chet Holmgren has guard skills, like we don't really see players like that. I think there's going to be concerns about maybe how he'll hold up physically. And we don't see players who are 7 foot, 195 pounds very often have long NBA careers. But I think we both agree on this, the thinking that you have as a team picking at number 1, you want to take the biggest swing. And Chet Holmgren, I think, to me, represents the biggest swing. That's why I think we'll end up getting closer to Chet being considered, if not a lot, close to a lock to go number 1. But there is a clear top 4 in this draft. And I think at this point, you could kind of throw them in any order and it wouldn't totally surprise me.
So that clear top 4 is Gonzaga's Chet Holmgren, Duke's Paolo Banchero, Auburn's Jabari Smith, and Purdue's Jaden Ivey. And I agree with you. Depending on the day, I could make the case for any of them being drafted ahead or below any of the other. I do think those 4 should be the top 4, although I would listen to arguments for Keegan Murray cracking into that just because I think he's got some stuff that is so easily translatable. Sometimes you watch prospects and it's like, okay, how is that going to translate to the NBA? I don't have any questions about how a lot of the stuff Keegan Murray does is going to translate to the NBA. So I'd listen to arguments for him cracking the top 4, but outside of that, I think those are pretty clearly the top 4. I agree with you. That seems like a high number to be considered for number 1. Like I remember in the Anthony Edwards draft, at the end of the day, and I know they didn't go in this order 1, 2, but at the end of the day, I think most people were either Anthony Edwards or LaMelo Ball. I don't think many people were interested in taking James Wiseman number 1. I know he went in between them, but at the end, that was probably between Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball. You could have a real debate about those guys. They both look terrific so far. Even if you were redoing that draft, you might go LaMelo 1, Edwards 2, but Anthony Edwards has been fabulous. To be considering 4 is an unusually high number at number 1. So let me ask you this. Is that because these are 4 awesome prospects, or is it because there's no sure thing at the top of this, the way there seems to be normally?
I think it's because there's 4 really good, but maybe not great prospects.
Right.
I think, again, we could go back to in a few years from now. I think we could say like, okay, Chet Holmgren should have easily been number 1, and he's an all-star. Clearly, he was a star and kind of an outlier in this class where we thought there was 4 guys. But to this point, it really does feel like this is a strong class, but maybe not as strong as, going back to the Zion and Jaw draft or the LaMelo and Anthony Edwards draft. Like, I think more often or more likely this class is just going to be considered like really good at the top, but maybe no clear superstars at the top, which is I think going to obviously make an impact on how the top 4 ends up shaking out. Even in a few years, I wouldn't be surprised if like AJ Griffin, we're talking about him as maybe a guy who should have snuck in as someone in this elite top tier, or even Shaedon Sharpe, who was a former number 1 recruit in his own class. He played 0 minutes at Kentucky last season, has already declared and has left the door open to potentially returning to Kentucky, although I don't think anyone expects that he will. There's a lot of potential home run swings at the top. Like if you're a team picking in the top 4, top 5, I think you have to be really excited about the potential of all of these guys. But I'm not entirely sure that there's a sure thing at the top of this draft, and certainly not multiple sure things, at least from a confidence standpoint. I'd be really excited about getting some of these top 4, top 5 guys. But definitely, I think the top of this draft is a little bit weaker than what we've seen in previous years.
Right. I could see any of them developing into stars. I wouldn't bet my 401k that any one of them develops into an undeniable star. My latest mock draft has Chet Holmgren at the top. And you'll like you said, you like Jaden Ivey at the top. It's totally reasonable. Paolo at the top, reasonable. Jabari Smith at the top, reasonable. The reason I went with Holmgren, and I'm not comparing these players at all because they're nothing alike. I'm just comparing this very specific point. Chet Holmgren literally did unprecedented things in college basketball this year. Like you would have every 2 weeks, it felt like. You could go to ESPN Stats and Info, and it'd be like, and Chet Holmgren became the first player to ever do boom, 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 boom. Chet Holmgren just became the first player in 25 years to do boom, 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 boom. The only 2 players in the past 40 years to do this thing are Chet Holmgren and so-and-so. Chet Holmgren just became the first freshman to do this thing since this thing started being recorded as an official stat in 1967. There's like every few weeks there was one of those things. He was doing things that people his age had either rarely done in college basketball or never done in college basketball. And what that reminds me of is when Luka Doncic was playing in Europe. And it was like no European player his age has ever done this, 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 and this. No European player his age has ever done this, 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 and that. And it was just a lot of unprecedented, undeniable stuff. A lot of people had played at his age in this league, and they had never done the things he was doing. And yet when people watched him, they had questions. Mm-hmm. And the questions were about his body, about his athleticism, about his quickness. What's he gonna, okay, sure, he's dominating these guys at this age, and that's awesome. But what's going to happen when he's playing against NBA athletes? What's going to happen when he's being guarded by 6'6" NBA level athletes with long wingspans and incredible feet? Well, you've been watching. Let me tell you what happens. He cooks them over and over again. Basically, since the moment he's been in the NBA, he's been doing all of the things that he was able to do in Europe. He just moved to a different continent and started cooking guys the same way he was cooking guys over there. And if it's possible to learn something from previous drafts, and I hope that it is, it's that from that one, folks got so caught up on what they imagined he might not be able to do and stopped focusing as much as they should have been focusing on the things he was so clearly doing. Yeah. And I think there's some of that going on with Chet Holmgren. He's thin. I got it. I don't know that he'll ever be a bodybuilder. I don't know that he'll ever win a weightlifting competition. I don't know that you'll ever look at him and say he's anything other than a skinny guy. But he does so many things at an elite level. He's an incredibly unique prospect. And I'm wondering, not guaranteeing, just wondering if people have questions about his body and his strength and how all that's going to work at the next level. Because you hear this all the time. How's he going to guard Joel Embiid? Which, by the way, always drives me crazy with prospects. Let me, a little aside real quick. For years, you'd be looking at, 2-guard prospects. And somebody would say, okay, but like, how's he going to guard Kobe? Well, he's not going to guard Kobe. Nobody guards Kobe. Kobe probably put 35 on him, right? And it's like, how's Chet Holmgren ever going to guard Joel Embiid? How does anybody guard Joel Embiid? They don't.
You don't.
So yeah. So I get it, but I think sometimes taking prospects and then asking the question, how are they going to guard this person who plays the same position, who is like the best in the world at that position? Like, they're not going to guard them. Like when James Harden was in his prime, which seems like something in the past now. How's he going to guard James Harden? He probably won't. He'll probably guard him the same way everybody else does. And I know there's a difference between guys who can't guard James Harden in his prime, or Joel Embiid right now, and or Kobe in his prime, and like bad defenders. Like, I got that. But I don't get caught up on that too much. Like, if he goes to the West, he'll play Joel Embiid twice a year. It'll be fine. I just wonder if people get so caught up on the body that they don't pay close enough attention to the other stuff, and he gets into the NBA as the second pick or the third pick, and I don't really think it goes any lower than that. But the people who question about him, they go, oh geez, he's doing all the stuff that I've watched him do in high school. He's doing all the stuff that I watched him do in college. Why did I not think he would be able to do all of this stuff in the NBA? Again, not guaranteeing that, because I have questions about all these guys. But the reason I would lean toward him is because I'm more interested in focusing on the unbelievable stuff he does than I am focusing on his, slight frame.
Yeah, and I think that's the right way to approach at least scouting with Chet, because there are some definite questions. I love the comparison with Luka's, because I think we both had him number one on our boards going into that draft. And I feel like there were more legitimate questions about Luka than there are with Chet. I was real concerned about, okay, what he's doing in Europe is fantastic, but can the speed translate? Is he able to get like a quick first step? And those concerns with Luka, I think, were pretty real. Turns out they didn't matter, obviously, right? But with Chet, I'm more confident that some of the skills that he has is going to translate. Like, is he going to be able to guard Giannis? No, but probably no one's going to be able to guard Giannis, right? Like, so yeah, against bigger bigs in the NBA, I would imagine the physicality is going to be challenging for him. But in terms of his competitive nature, what we've seen from him at the college level, you can't really muscle and push around Chet Holmgren. Like, he had some games where he struggled against physicality, but I don't think it's a theme. Like, I don't think that's going to be a problem for the rest of his career. And what we saw from him throughout the entire season with Gonzaga was an elite shot blocker, a guy who, if there was a stat recording shots altered around the rim or just straight up scaring dudes around the paint, he would have probably led the statistical category in that. So that is absolutely going to translate. I feel very, very confident in that. And then if you get anything else on offense from him outside of just being a lob threat, a guy who can shoot above the break threes or even create a little bit, then I think it's all gravy. So you're talking about maybe the difference between a really good starter and maybe an all-star. But if you're picking number one, like, so long as he's healthy, and obviously that's a question for anyone in the draft, so long as they can stay healthy, then there's really not a bad option. And I think that's kind of the qualm, the argument with Chet is, what are you getting? Like, I feel pretty confident Chet is going to be a very competent, if not star, NBA player.
Do you agree? If Chet Holmgren's got the highest ceiling, and I think we're on the same page there, Paolo Banchero is the safest of the pick. Would you agree with there's just no way he's not a really good NBA player for a long time, again, if he stays healthy. You can question what his ceiling is, I guess, but I can't imagine Paolo Banchero being anything other than a really good, at worst, a really good NBA player.
Yeah, of the four, he's clearly, I think, the most polished. That's the word I always throw around with Paolo, because he's a guy who I think you could plug in right away, and he's putting up 20 points per game on an NBA team. Just his offensive polish, the way he's able to not only create his own shot in the mid-range, but like, he grew up as a guard. Like, he has some real passing and some playmaking that we saw quite a bit at Duke. Like, he was clearly, I think, Duke's best passer at 6'10". Like, that is a rare skill to have. And on offense in this NBA, I think that's super valuable. So I feel the most confident that he's going to be a very productive NBA player. I'm not as confident that he would be like the superstar of the bunch, but definitely I think one of the safest guys. Clearly why he's probably going to go in the top 3. And I would probably make a small case for Jaden Ivey if we're talking in terms of like total ceiling. Chet and Jaden Ivey, I think, are, to me, on that same plane. But in terms of safeness and how they project to the NBA level, Paolo, I would agree with you, has the most polish of these top prospects.
How concerning, if at all, again, talking about the top shelf prospects in the 2022 NBA draft, how concerning, if at all, is it that though Jabari Smith was awesome, and I believe is in the betting markets the favorite to be the number 1 overall pick in the draft, how concerning is it that for the most part in his 1 year of college, they couldn't just throw it to him and tell him to go take over games and make plays? Like, they really didn't do that too much. It was the guards who were trying to win games at the end. You would think, in a vacuum, if you've got the probable number 1 overall pick, you could just give him the ball and say, hey, go take over this thing. But he really wasn't equipped to do that in his 1 year of college. Does that bother you?
That does not personally bother me. I'm more bothered by what he did against Miami in the NCAA tournament, where he had 10 points, played 35 minutes, and was really, really ineffective. He was 3 of 16 shooting in that game. For a guy who, his kind of calling card at 6'10" is becoming an elite shooter at the NBA level. Like, if Miami's defense is going to do that to you, like, yes, it's a one-off, but that was a huge stakes game in the NCAA tournament. Auburn needed him to step up and make shots, and he was not able to deliver. Walker Kessler also really struggled in that game. In terms of creating, like, that's just not Jabari Smith's game. He's not going to be the guy who's going to go out and create shots for you when the game is on the line. That is not what he did in college. Bruce Pearl never really asked him to do that at Auburn. I don't think that's going to be his role in the NBA. But in the NBA, I think he's going to be a really good defender. He's got great size. He's an excellent shooter. And when you're a dead-eye three-point shooter at 6'10", that is a mismatch nightmare. You're always going to be able to have a role in an NBA. And at the power forward spot, like, I think that is his case for why he should clearly be considered as one of the top guys in this draft. For some of those reasons, among them being that I don't think he's a creator, I would not take him with my top pick. But the betting markets, as you said, they have him as the projected number 1 pick. This is pre-lottery, obviously, and we'll see how this unfolds. But yeah, I think that is very, very, very interesting that given some of the holes in his game and the fact that he is not a creator, he is still the favorite. I think what we saw from Jabari Smith as a freshman at Auburn this season, he was able to develop. And I think in terms of some of these top guys, he showed the most promise developmentally of any of the players that I saw. He went from like, oh, wow, this guy's like a lottery pick, to, oh, wow, this could be the number 1 pick in the draft. We saw some playmaking, that he was able to create his own shot off the dribble, some passing skills. Like, again, he's not going to be a primary creator. I don't even think he's going to be a secondary initiator in the NBA. But if you can add even a little bit of playmaking, a little bit of shot making on top of what he already brings to the table, then yeah, we're talking about a guy who's going to go top 5 in the draft.
So people who don't follow it too closely might not realize, which franchises are actually, I don't want to say the favorites because nobody, that's the thing that gets lost. People say, Houston's the favorite to get the overall first over. No, they're not. Like they have a 14% chance. Nobody's the favorite. There are teams that have a better chances than others, or more chances than others, but nobody's the favorite. Even if you are Houston, Orlando, Detroit, which each have a 14% chance to get the number 1 overall pick, it means you've got 86% chance to not get the number 1 pick.
Yep.
So nobody's the favorite, but Houston, Orlando, Detroit each have a 14% chance, followed by Oklahoma City at 12.5%, then Indiana 10.5%, Portland 9%, Sacramento 7.5%. And again, the NBA draft lottery is Tuesday night, and I will be updating my mock draft just as soon as I can get to it, following the announcement of how the ping pong balls landed.